We good? Okay. I'll go ahead and get started as people are filing in. It's right about 11:30. Time to get going. So welcome, everybody. My name is Sam Moreau. I am the Director of User Experience Design and Research in Windows and Windows Live. And I'm here today to talk about designing Metro style and the principles and personality behind it. First, I wanted to give you sort of a sense of what I'm going to cover. And so I'm going to spend about the first 45 minutes or so talking about me. Just kidding. Even my mom wouldn't sit through that. Actually, what I'm going to talk about is sort of like the background and inspirations for Metro style design. That's going to be like the first part that I talk about. And we've said Metro, I'm going to guess, 7,000 times in the last 2 days. And so my goal is to say it 1,000 to get it to 8,000 times. But really what I want to do is I want to like pack up a bunch of the inspirations and the backstory behind Metro and how we got here and like really what it means and give that to you guys as like so you can understand sort of like the backstory, like where this whole Metro thing comes from and really what it's grounded in. The second thing that I want to do is something a little bit more practical, which is I'm going to try to take it down into the principles. Jensen referred to some of the principles yesterday. And I'm going to try to unpack those, give you an examples of each of those and how to apply them, to use them as a framework for you guys when you go out and make your apps so that you can use them to make your decisions. But first, back to me. That was another joke. Actually, this isn't about me. Like I said, I am the design director for Windows and Windows Live, and I worked on Windows 7 and on the Windows 8 project. But really, I'm here today representing a bigger thing. I'm representing Microsoft Design in whole. And Microsoft has this really large, talented community of user experience professionals. And we work together across all the different parts of the company, and it's an honor to be able to represent not only all of the people that are currently sort of at Microsoft, but also like a bunch of really talented people that have come before us that we are building on top of. At Microsoft, I'm a part of what's known as the User Experience Leadership Team, which basically what that is sort of like the senior leaders of each of the major business groups. So think of Windows, Windows Phone, Office, Bing, Xbox, Server, some of the major divisions of Microsoft. And we have a set of leaders across those, and we work together to help steer a common Microsoft design language. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is the work of hundreds of incredibly talented people. And like I said, I'm just honored to be able to represent it. So what is Metro design style? As I talked about, Metro design style, like it is a new language or a new aesthetic that we've really made popular with the Windows Phone release, and then the Windows 8 release, we're taking it to this next level. But it's not, it may seem sort of fresh, and I appreciate like all of the comments in the blogosphere and the tweets, and there's all this sort of really positive energy. We really appreciate that. It's been, we worked really hard on it. We're really proud of it. There's been a lot of positive reaction to a fresh new aesthetic, a fresh point of view around design that Microsoft has been working on. And like I said, we've been working on this for a really long time, years and years. Product after product, we've been working towards developing Microsoft's design aesthetic. And what I want to do today is talk a little bit about some of the key influences of the Microsoft design language. It feels very fresh and modern. In reality, it's rooted in some very old, classic design movements and traditions. The first one that I'm going to talk about is modern design. Modern design is typically referred to as, it's largely credited as coming from a school known as the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was a school of design, and everybody, at this moment, everybody's glazed over and went, oh my God, art school, what happened? How did I get in this room? I promise.
Just to know it's going to be on the final.
Okay, it will be on the final. It's funny, one of the guys in front just said, Hey, designer, make me a t-shirt. Stop talking. I'll get to that, I promise. No, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bauhaus, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the Bauhaus stood for and how it helped influence the modern design movement. The second thing that I'm going to talk about is the International Typographic Style. Traditionally, this is known as Swiss design for shorthand, and it's sort of a branch that came from the modern design movement at the Bauhaus. And the third thing that I'm going to talk about that was a key influence and inspiration for us in developing Metro was motion design and cinematography, and I'll talk a little bit about some of that as well. But the three key points here are sort of like Bauhaus, Swiss, and motion design. So Bauhaus. Bauhaus is a school. This is actually it. This is the school. And it was started in about the 1920s, 1930s. And what the Bauhaus school believed was a fierce reductionism. It was about stripping away adornment and decoration and moving things to the functional. So it was extremely about like reducing things to their essence and bringing in like the function of the thing. Now, this was interesting because at the times, if you sort of like think about it, like most movements, like in order for them to take hold, they have to be in reaction to something. So what was Bauhaus like in reaction to, like this fierce stripping down? Let me do a little exercise with you for a moment just to like put a picture in your mind. I want you to think about a chair, and now I want you to think about adorning this chair as garishly as possible. I want you to put curls on the handles. I want you to put lace in your mind. I want you to put like frills and patterns and colors and adorn it as garish and extravagant as you can. Bauhaus was about the anti-that. It was stripping it down into a chair's purpose is to sit in, and that doesn't have to be ugly. That can be beautiful. Its function can be beautiful. And so the Bauhaus was a reaction to this sort of like over-adornment and excessive decoration, right? And it was about stripping it down to its bare essence and then focusing on making that essence beautiful. Make it beautifully crafted, make it beautifully engineered, make the function beautiful. Why did this take hold? Why did the modern design movement take hold? It was because the world had changed. The Industrial Revolution had swept across the world, and it had changed the world at this point. Communications, travel advancements like the telephone, the telegraph, the railroad, the car, like all of these things were starting to sort of percolate and happen. And what that was doing was making the world smaller. People and businesses much more connected. And the problem, or the reaction, was that the artisans of the time, the people who were doing architecture, industrial design, print design, newspapers, they were using yesterday's thinking. The world at this time had not moved. Like the world had changed, but like the artisans, the craftspeople, the people who were making things, were still using yesterday's design thinking, much like today. Jensen alluded to this a little bit. I'm going to go talk about it a little bit more. But the world changed. The world is a smaller place. Yesterday's crafts, yesterday's techniques will not work for tomorrow. The second thing that was an influence for us was Swiss design. I called it a minute ago International Typographic Style. At the heart of International Typographic Style is a focus on the functional, because it came out of the Bauhaus, but it was a focus on the functional using clean, crisp typography. That's like the easiest way to think about it. Clean, crisp typography. Flat color and beautiful hierarchy and symmetry, right? Like this picture that's on the screen right now is beautifully crafted. It's using typography, stark contrast, clear, crisp lines. It's extremely legible and extremely clear and useful. We see this a lot in places like airports, subway stations, street signs. These are like the places where you tend to see this. And the way you sort of see it is like, all right, it's very flat. very typographic. I also called it the international typographic style. The reason is because it's universal, right? Regardless of your ability to speak the language or read the language, you may need to get to your flight in an airport. You may need to catch a train. You may need to traverse a map, right? Swiss design is great at being clear and clean. It's direct. It's beautiful in its information design. It's clear in its hierarchy. And it's beautifully stark and modern. So why is this that you see these things in places like airports? We call this system wayfinding systems. We call it, we use the word wayfinding a lot. Really what that means is you're in an airport, you're busy, you're in a hurry, you're late, you need to find your way. You're surrounded by it, actually. If you stop and think about it, the conference center, obviously, has build signs all over the place and green arrows pointing you every direction that you need to go to get to from one session to another session. Over my shoulders, an exit sign. Everybody knows now where the fire hose is, right? That clean, clear, crisp information. When you need it, you'll appreciate the fact that it looks like that, right? It's about this clean, clear, crisp information. Why? Because life is in motion. We all live our lives late and busy, in a hurry, with people in our ears, noise all around us, and what we need is clear, crisp information. We need to not have to do the work to find the information when we're on the street. This person, you're late for the subway. You don't want to think about how awesome the designer was that made this 3D and beveled and flying in space. You need to know, you need the 4-tube. That's where you're going. I got to get to my train. I'm late for work, right? You want the information quick, clear, clean. Life is messy. You need information that's clear and crisp. That's why the Swiss typographic movement is very important to us. And that's why it makes sense in a modern world. Its focus is on the cleanliness, readability, beautiful graphic design, and it uses the basic tools of typography, grid, and bold, flat color. Interestingly enough, another thing that it picks up, and you probably saw this a lot in some of the demo apps and things like this, is it uses photography in the place of illustration. It says it's about being real, right? Life, this picture, that's real. That's what life looks like. Now, the third thing that I talked about was motion design, cinematography. And this, I realize that this is not motion design, but I wanted to use this to illustrate a pretty interesting point. This is a poster for the Public Theater in New York. And it's from 1995 or 1906 or whatever. Now, this is a beautiful example to me. This was done by Paula Scheer, who's an incredibly talented graphic designer. And what this illustrates to me is that type can dance. This is beautiful graphic design. This is not stale or static. Even though it is static, it's a printed poster, it's dancing. It's got funk, right? It's using grid, it's using bold colors, it's using hierarchy. The information that you're getting from it is beautiful, right? You're compelled. A lot of things that we talked about yesterday, I think Jensen talked about this a lot, it's be compelling, make your apps beautiful, compelling, and rich. And part of that is about great graphic design like this. There's another thing that the reason that motion matters is because of emotion. Now, I can't show these trailers here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what was some of the key influences for us. There's a really famous motion designer who did movie opening credits. His name was Saul Bass. And this was sort of in the early 50s, 40s-ish era through probably into the 70s, I believe. And Saul Bass did some of the most beautiful opening credits. They use typography and motion and flat color and graphic design. And so one that I'd recommend that everybody looks at, like not now, I can imagine the music trailers, everybody like instantly goes and looks this up. But it's something that I would recommend that you check out is North by Northwest, the trailer, and also The Man with the Golden Arm. Now maybe you guys are thinking to yourself, like, wait a second, movie opening credits? Seriously? How does that have an emotional impact? Like, that's just the thing that runs before the movie. Okay. Think about this for a second. Dun 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 dun. Can anybody have a picture in their mind? Right. And if you notice, the opening credits of Star Wars, the emotional impact is the whole thing goes black. Then it stops, and there's a pause, and then this tiny little in a galaxy far away, and then all of a sudden, dun 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 dun, and the type starts traveling away. And now, you're being taken somewhere. You're being taken on an emotional journey. That is storytelling. That's the power of the emotional impact that motion and typography can do. Another interesting one that was influential for us because we thought it was really interesting was the Steven Spielberg film Catch Me If You Can. I would encourage you to go out and watch the opening credits of this thing. It's really interesting and quite fascinating. I think it's beautiful. And one of my favorite things to do is just to go on YouTube and do a search for kinetic typography. And what you're going to find is all kinds of like really beautiful expressions where they've taken like movie dialogue and they've gotten rid of everything, just done the words in typography that's moving, right? Now, and once you go and look at like, you know, the kinetic typography for like Pulp Fiction, you'll realize why I couldn't show it today. So again, just to pack all of that up, and the key influences is we were really influenced, the Metro design language is really influenced by three key things. One is the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus in modern design was about reductionism, and it was about a focus on function and making function beautiful. The second thing that influenced us was the International Typographic Style, Swiss design. Beautiful, clear, clean, crisp typography. Bold use of color. Bold visuals for a bold design, a bold era of software. And thirdly, making it an emotional connection, being fast and fluid through motion design and cinematography. Reduce to the essence, be clear, honest, and beautiful, and then bring it to life. Those are sort of the key structures or the key influences behind the Metro design language. So that connects you back into the past. Now what I'm going to talk about a little bit are the design principles. My buddy here is like, seriously, where's my t-shirt? I promise. So Metro design principles. Let me talk for a minute about why principles matter, or why take a principles approach. Like what we could do is we could just like, and I don't think you really want this, is we could just be like, here's the rules, it's a giant book, like go read all of this, and then you can go and read all of the rules and then try to figure out how to paint by numbers to make something. That's not the principled approach. The principles approach is to not have answers. It's to have a framework for how to think about some things that everyone shares commonly. And then you're allowed to make your own decisions. You have the freedom to make your own decisions. But the net result of thousands and thousands of independent and disparate decisions is something that's cohesive, something that's harmonious, and something that's high quality. So the principles for us are our way of sort of expressing to the world, these are the things that we value. These are the things that we hold true, and these are the ways that we make decisions. And we give them to you as a way of saying, now you, if you choose, can make your decisions with the same values, the same piece thinking behind how you made your decision that we made our decisions with the goal of harmony and quality. So Jensen mentioned them yesterday briefly, but these are the 5 design principles of Metro. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about each one. I'll have some examples I will have, I'll go into details. I'll give some sort of like sub-points below each of them, and then we can talk about it. And I'm going to try to get through all of this content and save room for questions at the end. I'll do my best, and if not, I will hang around afterwards. Okay, so let's go through each one of these in detail. Pride in craftsmanship. Be fast and fluid. One of the things I thought was really fascinating was that be fast and fluid it became a drinking game. That's great. I love the fact that like the principles are so sticky that everybody's drinking to them or something. The third one, authentically digital. This one I'll probably spend a little bit of time on because it tends to raise eyebrows a little bit. The fourth one, do more with less. And the fifth one, win as one. Those are the 5 principles of Metro design. So let's dive in. Pride in craftsmanship. Now, I know that all of you are extremely proud of what you make. And that's great. We love that. And this is not to say that you're not proud. This is not to say that you don't have craftsmanship. What this is to say is that we all have to remember to have craftsmanship. It's not something that you can put on at the end. You can't sprinkle quality on the end. You have to engineer it in from the beginning. Beautiful code equals beautiful experience. The reimagining of Windows from the silicon all the way to the experience is part of pride in craftsmanship. We intentionally worked at all of the levels. All of it matters. I could make, the most beautiful design in the world. If it's not performant, you will hate it. I can make the most performant product in the world, and if it's ugly and unusable, you will hate it. You have to sweat the details at every level. You have to make your applications safe, reliable. They have to behave the way people expect them. They have to fit into their busy lives. They have to have balance, symmetry, and hierarchy. Now, this is something that goes back to that Swiss design, and it's about fitting in. It's about fitting into people's lives. It's about having some things big, some things small. It's about like all things at one level will just wash away into a common din. You have to have symmetry. You have to have hierarchy. And like tactically, like we have a grid. We're giving you this grid. We have baked the grid into the templates and the tools, and we really encourage you to use it. It has a lot of the design thinking, has a lot of the balance and symmetry and hierarchy baked into it. So let's talk about a little example. And I have to this is funny, I have to sort of give credit here to Ed Bott, interestingly enough, in a totally tangential way, is Ed Bott, who's a writer for ZDNet, tweeted these 2 pictures that I'm about to show a couple weeks ago in a totally not related sense. And it was such a beautiful illustration of what I was going to talk about. I stole it. So partial credit to Ed Bott and partial credit to the New York Times here. This is a New York Times front page from about 1906, I believe. I want you to look at it for a second, and I want you to think of 3 words. Describe this with 3 words in your mind. Right? Now I'm going to fast forward to modern day New York Times. Let's talk about the differences. Let's go back and do this again. What I see is dense. I see clear in terms of everything is got it, New York Times, pretty straightforward. I know what it's about. I respect it. It's very established. But also what I see from a design standpoint is I see just dense. There's not a ton of balance or symmetry. I also see misalignment. I see things that are sort of semi off kilter. I see some columns that are running at angles. I see sort of crowded misalignment. Now, if this came out today, you would think, is this really the New York Times? Seriously? I'm not sure I trust it. Like the columns are kind of running together. This looks like a cheap knockoff from somewhere. Like, did I just buy like, I just bought like bogus New York Times made in someone's garage. The reason is because you've grown to trust the idea of them when things are more balanced, they're more symmetrical, they have information hierarchy, and they're laid out with more structure and integrity. The grid is an integrity piece, right? It's about trust and it's about stability. When you get that, all of a sudden the information is easier to parse. It's more clear. It's more clean. You can go about your day and work less hard reading this one than reading that one. Now, well, why is this? What's the difference between 1906 and 2011? Well, one of the things is a changing in aesthetic. Things are important. Quality is more important to people. It's grown to the point where, like, you think about things like quality. Like, you think about, like, the sound a door makes when it closes on an expensive car versus a cheap car. Right? You think about quality, and it sort of affects your decision making. Also, though, probably more relevant to you is the tools of the trade have improved. Like they were making this with glue. They were pasting together with typewriters and glue things like this, right? This doesn't use typewriters and glue. This has got tools. This has got like you could flow digitally all the content into these columns, and it lines up beautifully. And they've done all this work to make the tooling better, which is also why we've worked so hard to get all of our templates included in the tools and to get like our personality and our design philosophy baked into those templates so that you can just start from a more beautiful place. I think. So this is that grid that I talked about. Sounds pretty boring. Right now you're like, right. Pixels, I get it. What this is not just pixels, it's a grid, and the grid is based on units. Each of these units is like that tiny little blue square up in the corner, is actually what we call a 5x5 grid, a unit, and each of those is 20 pixels by 20 pixels. So now, like, that's great, but what does that mean? Well, part of what that means is it helps you decide where to put things, and the reason that we decided where certain things go. This, as Jensen talked about, is what's part of what we call the silhouette. So this says, in a content region, this is where you start. I think it's 7 grid units from the top. This also is like what I'm going to flip between here. It doesn't mean that the grid is rigid. It doesn't mean that it's inflexible. What I'm showing here is I'm sort of flipping between like different ways that you can use the grid. What you'll notice is common is that there is some symmetry and balance. There's big things and little things. Gaps between things are common. They're uniform across the system. So again, this is about flexibility for you to do what you need to do with your content, but have it have an underlying bone structure that inspires confidence and stability, right? Left margin. It's very common. We want to have this feeling that there's a top edge, there's a left edge, there's a sort of clear, crisp. Now, obviously, if you're, I don't know, a game or something like that, it might be absurd to lay yourself out on this grid. And so, obviously, like it's not like a law. It's just like when you're in a place where you're laying out content that could benefit from a grid, use the grid, please. And again, more examples of different sizes, different weights, different units, and different ways to apply the grid. Going back to that New York Times example, every day their grid changes, but they have a grid. They take the grid and they adapt the content to fit their grid. But every day, you're actually reading a paper that has the same grid every day after day. So again, just a few more examples. Now, obviously, like, not everything is a block. Some things are text. Some things are lists. There's a tremendous amount of lists making in software, right? So we have, different ways. We went through exercises to think about different ways to handle lists. This, is just, we were just taking the basic things that happen in software and we were working to put them on the grid. Now, what you'll notice here, and Jensen did talk about this as well, is what you see is baselines. What you see is a common typographic grid where your eye can flow across. It's also important, going back to that New York Times example, right? You want the eye to comfortably flow across things. Why? Remember the subway example, like life is busy. You're in motion, you're moving around. You need some structure and cleanliness to be able to let you get the information more clearly and easily. So here, this is just a quick illustration, a little example of like, you don't have to have the one type of list. This is laying out 3 different densities of lists, all using or conforming to the grid. And I put conforming in air quotes, because it's really not about conforming, it's about benefiting. So here's an example of how we think about typography. Remember in the Swiss design, we talked about clear hierarchy, clear information communication. Because of this, in our things that we make, we try to be very clear about meaningful differences between this point size, body copy, and something that's really supposed to stand out. Remember like the information hierarchy thing that we talked about? Remember that picture of the airport with the giant A and then the small sort of type? That tension, giant and small, is really important. It helps information be conveyed. It helps you consume information, right? So we use these 4 sizes, 9, 11, 20, and 42. And we have the weights in here as well, and we don't use certain weights at certain times. And then our font that we use is Segoe. And what's important here is that things will feel wrong if you took like 42 points Segoe and you made it like super bold, and it would feel wrong. It wouldn't feel right because it's overdoing its information design. Like it's overdoing the way it's communicating. It's too heavy. It's unbalanced. So these are also just examples of how to lay out type on the grid. And these are just some of the tools that our internal team developed and we use when we were made Windows 8. And some of this stuff we will work to make available to you guys as well in the future. Here is just another quick example of what we call a type ramp. And it's just sort of, again, this is about making meaningful distinctions between the sizes. Something that's just a couple points different is not a meaningful distinction. It results in clutter. It doesn't help convey information. It hurts the conveyance of information. So the second principle is fast and fluid. For those of you drinking at home, that's 8. So like we said, life is mobile. Delight with motion. Designed for touch. And on this one specifically, I want to talk about this for a minute. And I really want to encourage you to go to a talk that's coming up later today about the touch language and comfort. And I really want to sort of stress, like, the significance of designing for touch is different. Like Jensen talked about the idea that you touch with one finger and then you move with another finger. You've got 2 fingers. You don't have to be singular in how you do things like gestures and input. And the guys later today are going to go in detail about the touch language and about like comfort and posture and the significance of thumbs. They're those little things that make us human. We should use them. Another piece is to be intuitive, and that's also wrapped up in the touch language and the sort of natural idea of touch and thumbs. And of course, part of fast and fluid is being responsive and ready. Like nobody wants to wait. And lastly, it's about being immersive, being compelling, and inviting. So this is just a quick little example. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on fast and fluid because you've heard it a lot, and there's a whole sort of talk dedicated to it. But I do want to tell a sort of quick little story behind this. And Jensen alluded to it with the finger painting example. But like this data is not just based on a few sort of like usability participants and like people that came in. Yes, we did all of that, and we measured people's thumbs and reach distances and everything. But also, like this data is also derived from the U.S. military. In a sort of weird little fascinating story, the U.S. military has this incredibly large database of human body measurements. Like, I guess you go into the military and they measure you. And what's interesting about that is that it's, across all ethnicities, it's across all genders. It's like it's the U.S. military, so it has like everybody is a representative of there, and it's a gigantic database because they've been doing this since like the 40s. So we used this. We bought this database from them, and we used this to sort of figure out like thumb distances and average lengths of thumbs and reach and things like that. So there's a tremendous amount of research and data behind this and behind our thinking about thumbs and reach and placement. So, authentically digital. Now, this is one, like I said earlier, that where people tend to sort of like furrow their brow a little bit and be like, really, authentically digital? What does that even mean? Well, I'll talk a little bit about this. One thing about being authentically digital is being like connected. Like, we live in a digital age, and the idea that you're not connected is archaic, right? We also, because we live in a digital age, things are dynamic and moving and alive. Pits with snakes. That was a joke. Another thing that's digitally authentic is typography. That's what we make. Like, we are made, like, our software experiences that we all make, they're made out of typography, really. Right? We read constantly. Like, the interfaces that we made are made out of typography. Let's celebrate it. Let's make it beautiful. Another thing is bold, vibrant colors are digital. Think about, going back to the thing that I talked about at the beginning with like, movie credits and things like that, like bold, vibrant, like emotional impact, clear, crisp. And of course, the last one is the motion piece. So humor me for a second, with a quick little story here. This is a picture of my son. Hi, buddy. This, a couple years ago, and I'm telling this story, a couple years ago, we live in Seattle, and every year in the summer, there is a Blue Angels Seafair show. And the Blue Angels are the sort of military jets that do like the tricks and the acrobatics and everything. And we were just sort of out in the backyard playing, and the Blue Angels were rehearsing for their big show. And out of nowhere, this Blue Angel just went like really low across our backyard. And it just scared the heck out of all of us. And we're all like frozen, it's pretty scary how fast those things go and how low it was. And like, whoa, that was pretty crazy. And all of a sudden, my son looks at me and he's like, Dad, rewind it. And I'm like, oh wow. He thinks he's the master of the universe. He's only lived in like a world of digital age. He's always been able to control everything. If he doesn't like what he's watching, he rewinds it or fast forwards it. He wants something, he goes to the computer and he types it in and he has it. Like, he's only lived digitally. He doesn't understand. So, after a little bit of therapy, he's fine now. But this made me think, like, there's generations of kids. They're growing up digital. Remember that Bauhaus thing? The artisans were using yesterday's tools. He doesn't understand yesterday at all. He only understands tomorrow. Like, there's a digital life that they live in. These are relics of yesterday. These are antiquated. Right? These are the result of artisans of yesterday. There is something better. There's something that's digital. There's something that's digitally authentic and has all those characteristics of what I care about. Things that are alive with activity, things that are personal. Right? This is beautiful. It's bold. It has information. It's useful. That's not useful. I don't need to know like where the sun is coming from reflecting off this piece of glass. That's ridiculous. Right? I need to know I missed a call from my wife. I need to know my best friend posted a picture. That's what I need to know. I need information. It's not about yesterday's tools. It's not about yesterday's design. It's about tomorrow's. I can just get the tiles to stop animating now. So the fourth one, do more with less. This is like, you can clearly connect this back to that Bauhaus movement, right? This is about being focused. This is about being great at something. Not being mediocre at a bunch of things. This is about having a clear, crisp, beautiful purpose. Be great at something. Right? The way you do that is you're focused and direct. Think about that signage at that airport. That is great at something. That fire hose, great at something. Very clear and direct. It's not trying to tell you where the bathroom is. It's going to be super useful when you need it. It's clear and it's crisp and it's clean. It's content before Chrome. We talked a lot about that, and it's really, really important. It's a really different way to think about it. If you need a picture in your mind's eye of content before Chrome, think of that icon, and then think of that tile. That's the difference. One is useful, one is not. And last on this one is inspiring confidence. Part of what's doing more with less is that it's about making things like direct and like obvious and like I'm the master of this. Remember my son has this feeling like he's just the master of everything. He's so confident because he understands digital. He understands this time. Is that he's super confident. He just thinks that he's the master of the universe. He just decides like, hey, Dad, why can't I do this? I don't understand. We have to let people have the confidence that they can. So I'm going to play a quick little video here of a usability test. And I thought this was really funny. I was trying to think of another analogy for sort of like the content before Chrome. And this guy did a better job than me, so I'm just going to play his video. Like I said, this is a participant in our usability labs. And he's playing on a little tablet here with the browser. We get that audio up.
I don't feel like I'm in a browser right now. I feel like this is the site that I want. I didn't need any junk up here. I didn't need junk down here. I'm not here to use the browser. I'm here to use the app. I'm not here to get the information I need. It's like the baseball umpire who's calling crazy calls. Nobody's here to see the umpire. They're here to see the game. And so I'm here to see the page, not the stuff.
Nobody's there for the umpire. And then here's another one that I wanted to play, which was around the same lines. And this is another usability participant in our lab, and he's just sort of playing with, he's actually using a mouse and stuff, but he's playing with just like a fake news reader, like a fake magazine-y type thing that we made.
I like how it fills the screen. Some of the apps that I use on my touch device, when you view the articles, they seem to be flooded with a lot of left, right, next page, previous page, zoom, font. I don't want to see that. I just want to see what I want to see.
So you see that? Cluttered. Left, right, previous, next, tools, bars. He only wants to see what he wants to see. Now, it's sort of an inside joke here is that originally the sort of content before Chrome, we talked about it as like pixels, not plastic. And so maybe we were leading him with the headline of this article, but maybe not. So the final principle that I want to talk about is win as one. Now you may be thinking like, wait a second. I'm a developer. I am going to go get super rich and famous because I'm going to capitalize on this Windows 8 opportunity to have this like hundreds of millions of customers. So why do I want the guy next to me to win? Help me understand that? Well, you don't. No, just kidding. What you want, what I mean by this is not like, hey, kumbaya, everybody, let's go to a party together. What I mean by this is to sort of like fit. Win with the UI model. Win down, win vertically. Take advantage of all the capabilities that the Windows 8 platform brings to you. Take advantage of the fact that once somebody learns that swipe from the bottom to reveal the tools in the app bar, They will know that everywhere across the entire system. Take advantage of that. If you go off on your own and invent your own ways, you're on your own, right? So part of this is about fitting into the UI model, right? It's about being great at implementing the right contracts, the picker, search, share contracts. It's really important that you fit into the UI model because it will help you. Right? You will be at the another end of a scenario of an app that doesn't exist yet. And that may be the thing that makes you win, right? It's about reducing redundancy. It's about working together to complete those scenarios, right? And again, that's like working together with another app on the other end that you don't know, right? That's the significance of the contracts that we talked about in Windows 8. And lastly, it's about tools and templates. We've designed these to scale. We've designed into them a lot of these principles, a lot of the Metro language, and a lot of the design philosophy is baked into them. We encourage you to use them as a starting point, then make them better, right? We wanted you to get good for free so you can spend your time getting great. And the last bit I want to do here is show you another example of why this is important. And this is another one of the usability participants. And this is a woman, sort of a funny story here is that she just curled up on a couch with pillows and stuff in the usability lab. But what she's talking about here is that she's been using the system for a while, and then we put her into a new application. And she's trying to do something, and she's sort of really just talking aloud about her thought, her stream of consciousness here.
So I want to see one like, oh, look at that. Our sleeves in, there they are. Okay. Your functions repeat themselves over and over and over, which is good. What works in one program works in all. I have to remember that. Right? The thinking in works here, the thinking in works other places.
Your functions repeat themselves. I have to remember that. What works in one place works in a bunch of places. The reason that's important is because people don't have that much space in their brains to hold how everything works if it works uniquely. And they want to transfer that knowledge. Life is busy, right? You don't want to have to think specifically about something. For you, you want to take advantage of that fact, that their knowledge in one place transfers to another place. That's the power of the touch language, and I encourage you to go to that talk. So with that, those are the final 5 design principles. And like I said, I encourage you all to take these, use them as a framework. Hopefully some of the examples and things like this will help you think about when you're making your app and you're making a decision that you can sort of help guide you one way or another to the decision that you feel is right. And then for you, the call to action, please attend the talks on the touch language and the personality and the controls. Please use the principles as a framework for your decisions. Please use the templates. And please partner with a designer. It's important because, like I said, yesterday's artisans aren't going to be able to succeed. And the way to give you the best advantage, in my opinion, to be successful, for you to get rich and famous, is to do the holistic job, right? That's what's important. But wait, there's one more thing. I just remembered. I have to make him his t-shirt. There you go, man. Thank you, everybody.